All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name's Stephen, and I'm here to talk to you about test management. And as you can tell, I'm English, and so hopefully I will speak. I've been told to speak clearly and slowly, so hopefully I can. Hopefully I can make it easy for the guys interpreting in the booth over there. So my first time in Moscow, so it's really great to have been invited to speak here, and I'd like to get one thing out of the way first when we talk about my experiences and why I lost my job as a test manager. And this is the first thing. I did not get fired. This was a positive experience. So now we've got that out of the way. This is a little bit about me. So I've been working in software for about 15 years. I've worked for companies like Nokia and Ericsson and Motorola. And I work for a company at the moment called the Yux Net-a-Porter Group, who are a luxury e-commerce retailer. And we're based in Bologna and we're based in London. We are actually hiring devs and testers at the moment. So if any of you are interested in jobs in Bologna or London, then do come and talk to me afterwards. I also do a podcast called Testing in the Pub. So if you like to listen to people talk about testing in pubs, then this is a good podcast. We're on iTunes, or you can visit our website too. So, advertising out of the way, let's get started. So, I've been told that you should always credit the people that inspire you when you put a talk together. And so this is what this talk has been inspired by. It's been inspired primarily by my experiences. So everything you hear today is true. It all happened, but this reflects my experiences. So it may reflect your experiences, it may not. It's in my context. Now, apparently you can also keep an audience engaged by putting some things in a presentation that they maybe won't expect. So here's some things to watch out for as we go through. There are some dinosaurs in this presentation. There is the band Radiohead in this presentation. I'm English, so Winston Churchill is in this presentation somewhere. And also the band Take That, which hopefully you've also heard of. So watch out for these. So, a bit of background. So, my name's Stephen. I am no longer a test manager. And what I'm going to tell you about today is why that is and what I've learnt as a result. So, let's start at the beginning. So what had I done and what did I do prior to the change that happened to me? So, I had a fairly typical career in testing, you could say. So, I started as a developer, but then I realized testing was more fun, and I moved into testing. And I was a tester, a lead, a test manager, and fairly typical jobs. And this all started back in 1999, back in a kind of a world of silos and walls, and testers and developers communicating by bug report rather than talking to each other. And something that Elizabeth Hendrickson, if you've heard of Elizabeth Hendrickson, is referred to as driven by the misguided belief that testers test, programmers code, and the separation of the two disciplines is important. It was nicely summed up by a couple of roles I had when I worked at Nokia. So one of the ones is the one here. I was a quality gate manager. So I managed a quality gate. My responsibility was to stop the poor quality flowing downstream. Maybe I was like, ah. It never happened. You can't run an organization like that. But Nokia was a nice organization. They like to give progression to their employees. So I became a senior quality gate manager. I don't know. Maybe I got a bigger gate. Who knows? But there were some advantages to this. Ones that I'm not particularly proud of. And one of them was this. So it was very waterfall. I had a lot of control as a manager in this situation. And sometimes that control felt good. So my career continued. You could say it kind of continued with the almost the purity of Newtonian physics. I stayed in motion in my career until I was acted on by an external force. And that external force was the coming of agile into Nokia. And what happened is that they took away all my testers and they put them into different teams instead, formed around the work units. This should have been good, right? Maybe not for me, but I think it was good for the organization. But our organization looked like this. So we had small independent teams of developers and testers. Each of those was managed by a development manager, economy of scale. There are normally more developers in a company than there are testers. And then there was me as test manager in the middle, across all of the teams. So the teams were organized as cross-functional units, but the management was not. So as a test manager, I reported to a head of test, and the development managers reported to a head of development. And this wasn't necessarily very much fun. I had a lot of teams. At one point, I was test managing 6 different teams. There was a huge amount of switching between different tasks. I wasn't interacting with those teams on a daily basis. It was not so much fun. I was normally talking to the other test managers. I didn't have time to inspire and train testers, and I didn't have my own people that I could allocate tasks to and projects to that would make us better as an organization at our testing. And I used to get involved normally when there was a problem. So tester in team A would say, I've got this huge problem, bring in the test manager. And I would appear and try and solve their problem. And there were a lot of us as managers there involved in decision-making processes that we probably shouldn't have been. And the upshot of all of this was, as an organization, we were extremely slow. Our time to market for new features was extremely slow, and this was not good. We needed to move to faster release cycles. We needed to move towards continuous integration. Test managers and development managers just didn't fit in this. And it was nicely summed up by an example whereby if, say, a tester in one team and a developer in one team didn't get on with each other, they had something they disagreed about, they would escalate this to their relevant manager. So the developer to the dev manager, the tester to the test manager. And if those two managers couldn't agree, it would get escalated to the head of test and the head of development. And if they couldn't agree, it would end up on the IT director's plate. That's not good. And that used to happen a lot. Now, at the same time, I don't know whether this is a bit like Googling Google. If you talk at a conference and put up a picture of you talking at a conference, it's probably not good form. At the same time, I was at a continuous delivery conference, and one called Pipeline, which is in London. It's a very good conference. And I stood up and I said, well, I work for Yux Net-a-Porter. I'm a test manager, and I was speaking about the opportunities that we had at the company at the time. And at the end, I said, any questions? And the first question, hand goes up, and the guy says, do you think you'll be a test manager in a year's time? And I said, whoa, okay. But in the back of my mind, I thought, maybe he's right. So I had all this task switching. I had all these people asking whether my role was useful. I had all this firefighting and only getting involved when there were problems. Now, that could have made me feel like this. I said there'd be dinosaurs. Now, don't worry about me in this picture. I was perfectly safe because I did what any responsible parent would do. I sent my children to inspect the dinosaur-proof fence. We were safe. It's okay. No. Okay. So, as an organization, we were too slow. And things needed to change. They needed to change because the competitive landscape changed, the company changed, and our senior management realized that organized as we were, we would not be competitive. So, they instigated some changes. What were these changes? Well, here's the first change. No more test managers. But it's okay, don't worry. No more development managers either. Hurrah! And instead, we kept the good bits. So we kept the cross-functional, independent, autonomous teams that were organized around the different products that we produced. And we aligned those teams architecturally. And we came up with a new role. And this new role is called delivery manager. And the delivery manager is responsible for the team. So not just responsible for the testing, not just responsible for the development, responsible for the team. And our teams look like this now. So you have the happy people doing the real work in the middle, the testers, the developers, maybe UX and ops as well. And we have a delivery manager that handles how the team work, and a product owner that handles what the team work on and the prioritization. It's a much cleaner, leaner, and more efficient way of working. There aren't conflicts of interest because there's a single manager for that team, for the developers and the testers. It means that teams can be aligned and motivated around a single product. So this is how we look now. Now, you might be wondering, what happened to me? What happened to me in this? You might not care. It's okay. But so I lost my role out of this. I couldn't be a test manager anymore. And I lost that because the world changed and it forced me to adapt. So what you might be wondering out of this is, well, how does that affect testing? And more importantly, how, when there were no test managers, did we keep a focus on testing within the organization? And maybe how does that tie into a view of test management that certainly I feel is the way forwards? So what I'll do is I'll tell you what we did. Because we tried some things, and some of them worked, some of them didn't work. And the things that worked, I think, really formed the basis of test management going forwards. So the first thing we did is we looked at other companies. And I'm sure you've seen before the Spotify model. It's very famous. The way that using the idea of particularly chapters and guilds, that there is a good focus on disciplines like testing, for example. We also looked at a company called TradeMe, which is the New Zealand version of eBay, so a buying and selling auction site, essentially. And both of these companies had very similar setups, and elements of their setups were very closely aligned with what we had in terms of independent cross-functional teams, but with a good focus on things like testing. So the first thing we did is we made a test community. We formed a test community. And the idea here was that test community was an internal version of the great test communities that we have generally in different countries. So the sorts of communities that keep people like you coming to events like this, and like we have in other countries throughout the world. It's one of the things that got me interested in standing up and talking at things like this, is I became part of an external community, and I realized that there were other people who thought like me, and other people who had the same challenges that I had. So we made an internal version of that test community. And the primary reason we did this is because when you align and you give teams full autonomy, and you make them independent, you lose economy of scale. So a tester in one team may have a great way of solving a problem, but a tester in another team may never hear about it. Or equally, testers in all the teams may have a particular issue with something where it could be solved better if they got together. So we have this group, and it has a leader, and it has a committee that runs it, and we do things like this. So we have regular discussion sessions. We have internal speakers and conferences, for example, and showcases. It's there as the voice of testing. If anyone can't think of who to talk to about testing, they come to somebody either on that committee or they come along to a test community meeting. And it's really an enabler, getting all of our testers talking with each other and learning from each other. And we run a lot of our sessions using something called Lean Coffee. So who in the audience has heard of Lean Coffee as a concept? Okay, a few people. It's a really, really great way of having a structured but agendaless meeting. So I would really encourage you if you go to leancoffee.org, it explains how to run lean coffees. They're a great way of, on an ad hoc basis, organizing communities and making sure that there isn't a lot of setup required. So we learned some lessons from our community and our community setup. And the first one was that you need somebody looking after it. You need somebody overseeing your community because it takes time and effort. With the best will in the world, not everybody will just come along and contribute. You want to make sure that you're always asking and you keep asking what the community wants. So when you set a community up, the things that are important to people then may not be important to them later, and their priorities may have changed. You want to keep your community relevant. It's great when you have an internal community if you can persuade good external speakers to come in. That always gets lots of people interested. But it does take a little bit more organization to do so. So you should certainly think about doing that. Don't incentivize engagement in a community. I remember one occasion where another delivery manager came to me and he said, "Don't worry about the test community, Stephen. It's okay. My testers will be there every time now. I've put it in their objectives." And I said, "Oh, that's not necessary. That's a bad idea." Because the thing is, some people, and if you ever are responsible for organising a community, some people will really get into it and they'll really enjoy it. Some people won't. Don't worry about the people that won't. Focus on the people that are really interested and are really engaged and motivated and really contribute. Word of mouth will mean that people get to understand that your community is worth coming along to. It maybe will pull the other people along. And if all else fails, add food, add drink. It's amazing how many people will turn up if you say there will be food and drink. So, what else did we do to keep a good focus on testing when there were no test managers? This is one of the biggest things we did, and this is actually the thing that affected me the most. So a coaching team was formed. So we made a coaching team with people in full-time roles responsible for coaching different disciplines. So we had an agile coach, a development coach, and a testing coach. And I was the testing coach at that time. So this was my job. It was a full-time job. It wasn't something I did part-time. It was a full-time job across the whole IT team. And I was there basically to make the whole organization better at testing and help them. So I used to do a lot of this. So I'd coach and I'd train and I'd mentor the testers. I would be the guy that was responsible for making sure that the testing community happened. I'd go into teams. I'd work with them almost on an internal consultancy basis to help them get better at their testing. I'd spend a lot of my time educating the managers and the senior managers in the company because we had no more test managers, and those managers had mostly come up through development backgrounds. So helping them understand what good testing looks like. I'd also do more of things like this, raising the profile of the company for people who hadn't heard of us. And also then learning from events like this and bringing that knowledge and that learning back into the organization, back into our company to help us get better at testing. So we set this coaching team up. There was myself at the beginning and an agile coach. And we sat down and we prepared our area and we got all our post-it notes and all our books ready. And we waited for the phone to ring because, of course, everybody would want to come and get us to come to their teams and help. And nothing happened. We sat there and the phone didn't ring. And then we learned a very valuable lesson, which is you have to generate pull when you're coaching. You don't push yourself on a team. People don't want you unless you generate some pull. And so teams ask us for help. We don't push ourselves on the team. But one thing we did that really helped is we made this menu. It's called the Coaching Cafe service menu. So this we dropped this onto everybody's desk in the IT team one evening. And what this does is this says what we do. I mean, the prices are obviously made up. We work for free. But this says what we do. And overnight, people started to interact with us. And overnight, people started to ask us to help them. But all of this comes with one big disclaimer. It's the wine list, which you probably can't see particularly well out of the corner here. But the things on there include, we are not there to police you or dictate to you or be your test manager. So we weren't here to replicate something that was there before. We were there to help teams. And we were very, very clear up front that there's no silver bullet here. There's no way of going into a team as a coach and solving all their problems for them. We were there to go in and work with them and help them to identify those problems and identify ways they themselves could solve them. Because across the organization of 250 people, there was one test coach, and that was me. So I could not go into a team and then work with them and be really, really good and give them all the answers and then go and work with another team and they wouldn't know how to work themselves. They get too used to having me in their team. So there was no silver bullet, but we were there to help them get better. And other ways that we helped the whole organization get better was very much around education. This was extremely important. It was part of everybody's role. It is part of everybody's role. Everybody in this room, you need to be good at educating people about testing and educating people about what good testing is. Now, I used to spend a lot of my time educating the managers about testing and also helping them to understand how to manage testers, because a lot of them had come from development manager backgrounds. So they knew a lot about developers, didn't know a lot about testers. But then also, I'd spend a lot of my time educating the senior management team in the company, partly about testing, but very much about these are the guys that actually pay the bills. If you want more people in your team, or if you need a new tool and that tool costs money, it's the senior management team that's paying for that. They need to understand the value of good testing and why you need that. But then also, I spent a fair amount of my time educating the testers themselves, because our testers have got very used to having test managers. And so very used, in the event of a problem, to just escalate it to the test manager, and the test manager would sort it out for them, rather than thinking about, well, how can I fight this battle myself? How can I come up with a good argument for this? And only call in a manager at the last resort. Oh, talking of education. So I also used to do a lot of education around to the testers themselves. So used to run regular sessions every Monday about testing, which were free for anyone to attend, whether they were developers, testers, or anyone else in the organization. Used to very regularly do showcases to explain the good testing to the whole organization. We used to let our testers, we do let our testers go on at least one conference a year. We organize internal conferences. We make sure that where there are good online events or external events and meetups, that we publicize those internally so that people know what's happening. And also, I do an initiative called a blog post a day, which is where I read a lot of blogs a day, and I send one most interesting blog post out to the whole organization. Some people read it, some people don't, but as long as somebody reads it, there's some value there. And this has kind of worked. I mean, we've had our testers go on to talk at different conferences and start to become much more active in the external testing community. So you might be wondering, what happened? What did happen? So, we saw some positives. We saw some good things. We saw a greater sense of ownership in the team and a greater focus in the team on not just the development or the testing, but the whole of the delivery of valuable software to our customers. So testers were only focused on a single product, and they were managed by somebody who understood that product. That was a very good thing. There was more consistent education, so our testers were educated more consistently. And there was somebody, the coach, whose job was to do that education. And the test community really came together, and there was a really good voice for testing in the organization. But it wasn't all great. Some of our testers felt without test managers they weren't effectively supported enough. Some people chose to leave. And as a test coach, I spend a lot of my time educating people, and probably still far more time, particularly some of our management around why you shouldn't automate everything and automate all the testing. But I think we're in a better place, a far better place than we were before. So the teams are more focused. They can operate more like a set of small startups within an organization rather than one slow IT team. And when you have teams set up as small, independent, autonomous units, it makes this much, much, much simpler. And this is the main lesson I took from this entire journey. Independent teams take more ownership, and that makes everybody responsible for the quality. There's nobody else to blame. If you have separate teams of developers and separate teams of testers, it's very difficult to get to this. So, this happened to me. It might happen to others too. I know it's happened to other test managers that I've spoken to. Now, are my experiences ahead of everybody else's? Or is it actually a view of what's to come? What do we do as a test community? Do we bury our heads in the sand and pretend this isn't going to happen? Or do we actually just react to it? Because I think things are changing. I think teams work better when there's a single manager and a single set of goals. And I think there's less room, therefore, for test managers in the future. So you may be thinking, well, maybe I'm a test manager. He's telling me that maybe there won't be so many test managers. What should I do? The main thing I've learned going through this is it's not the end. It's very easy to think that this could be the end of everything. It's not the end. There is a whole world out there. And there's a world of roles. There's some excellent transferable skills that you pick up as a test manager, which you can use in other areas. Those skills you have with technology, influencing, managing people, organizational skills, they are extremely reusable. You can use this opportunity to your advantage as well and use those skills. I mean, you could jump into another test management role, or you could say, well, actually, as I did, this is a really good opportunity to do something different. And this gives us as a test community a really good opportunity, because this allows us to get more people who know and love testing into roles which aren't just about testing, to push for good quality from the inside of organizations. And this isn't just about test managers. So if you're sitting in the audience and you're a tester and you think, oh, he's talking about managers, this isn't just about test managers. If you're a tester and you currently report to a test manager, think about what will happen when that test manager isn't there. Who are you going to learn from? Where will you learn from? Who's going to fight any battles that you want to have or you need to have within an organization? Do you have the skills to do that? Do you have the skills to really explain what good testing is and the value that good testing brings? So I'll finish now with 2 requests. So if you're a test manager and you're in the audience, this is request number 1 for you. And the second one will be a request if you're a tester. And if you remember nothing from this entire presentation apart from these 2 things, that's okay. I'll still be happy. So if you're a test manager and you find yourself in a different role, don't forget where you've come from. Don't forget testing. Use this as an opportunity to spread the word of good testing far and wide and influence people that you maybe wouldn't have been able to influence before. Don't forget testing. And if you're a tester, please do this. Please take care of the test community. The test community is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it only survives and it only gets better because of the people in that community. And if there are no test managers in the future, you will need that test community more than you do now. So think about how you can contribute. Think about how you can learn from it. Think about how what you know and the skills that you have and the experiences that you all have that is different, how you can explain those to others, how you can use those to help other people get better. So to sum all of this up, I think there will be less test managers in the future. I think that will affect every one of us in one way or another. So think about what you will do when that time comes. Thank you.